Queensland police have identified a body found on the Gold Coast as 12-year-old Tiahleigh Palmer. She hadn't been seen since last Friday as she made her way to school in Logan. Her remains were discovered on the banks of the Pimpamar River on Thursday evening.
So, they found her. On the edge of a river, they discovered 12-year-old Tiahleigh Palmer, her body washing up like a dark, twisted secret finally coming to the surface. Everyone's heart sank with the weight of the news that she was no longer alive.
You know, I fell to the ground crying because I guess obviously it was my daughter and she was found washed up on a river. Like, what kind of animal leaves a little girl in a river? But the pain I felt was so bad, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything but cry.
One day, she was just a kid, smiling and waving goodbye, heading to school. And now, she was another face in a tragic story no one could have seen coming. It was October 30th. Tiahleigh went to school just like any other morning. She probably had her favorite backpack on, and maybe even planned to meet with her friends at lunch. But that routine day turned into something else, something that makes your skin crawl just to think about it. For 6 days, no one knew where she was. 6 days of wondering, fearing, and hoping against hope.
Tia was last seen on the morning of the 30th of October, dropped off at 8:10 outside a primary school in Marsden, south of Brisbane. She had just 2 blocks to walk to the high school but never arrived. Reported missing that day, police didn't issue a public appeal until Thursday. 3 fishermen discovering her body in grass near the Pimpamar River that afternoon. That's more than 30 kilometres away from where she was last seen. Detectives believe her body was left there.
And then, there she was. Not the way anyone wanted to find her. She was alone, far from home, on the muddy banks of a river 40 kilometers away. Her backpack, gone. Her uniform, missing. It was as if someone tried to wipe away every trace of her young life, leaving only a shell of the girl she once was. The shock rippled through the community, pulling hundreds together at the Brisbane Anglican Maori Mission, each heavy with grief and disbelief. They came to mourn her, to remember her, and to face the painful reality that nobody yet had the answers they so desperately needed. So after they found Tiahleigh, the story took a darker turn. For nearly a year, the detectives told everyone the version of her disappearance. The community clung to the idea of a stranger, a faceless figure who had somehow taken Tiahleigh away. They searched everywhere, checking every lead, and even combed through her social media. The public held on to this idea. A shadowy figure out there somewhere was responsible. But behind the scenes, detectives started to suspect something else, something much closer to home.
Was there anything unusual right at the beginning of this case in the reporting of Tiahleigh going missing?
In hindsight, yes, there was. Rick's demeanour, his behaviour, he became very emotional right from the start. He's broken down in tears, so much so that the social worker actually had to drive him to the police station to report her missing.
For at least 6 months, they carried a different theory in private, a story that seemed too twisted to say out loud. They'd kept the suspicion hidden, pushing forward with their quiet investigations, careful to stay out of sight. They were aware that they needed to be absolutely certain. They needed a solid case because this theory was so disturbing that even seasoned detectives were shaken.
I just think that, you know, if your son slept with an underage girl, then there's so many other ways to deal with it. You don't go and kill someone for it, I don't think. You know, he could have turned him in. There had to be more going on than just what they're saying.
The story wasn't about a stranger at all. Instead, it led them right back to her foster father, Rick Thorburn, the man who had supposedly dropped her off at school that morning, a man who seemed like he was just another caring parent. Rick lived on a quiet, rural property with his family, a place that looked safe, like somewhere you'd want to grow up. And in that home, his wife and 2 sons welcomed Tiahleigh as if she were their own. However, detectives now faced an almost impossible dilemma. Rick might not be the caring foster father everyone believed him to be. He was a man hiding a terrifying secret. One by one, the cracks began to show. They pulled the pieces together, gathering evidence bit by bit, until their picture of that day looked nothing like the story they'd been telling the public. And then, detectives seized a blue Ford Falcon from the Thorburn property. It was labeled as a vehicle of interest, and suddenly the investigation took on a new intensity.
Can you tell us why your car was seized?
Oh, right, okay.
Can you tell us why your car was seized by police?
Stay outside the gate, you're on private property, please. Okay? Nothing to say, you'll have to speak to the Crime and Corruption Commission.
Police stopped repeating the story about Tiahleigh being dropped off at school. It was starting to look like she'd never even made it to the school gates that morning.
Did it have anything to do with the death of Tiahleigh Palmer?
Absolutely not.
All right. How was her demeanour that morning?
She was on key. She was happy, really sprightly. And I was sort of pleased that she was happy that day. I just thought, we're going to have a good day.
Mate, is there anything you can tell me about this matter?
Nothing at all. I dropped her off.
The details that came out were haunting. Detectives dug into the story, hearing rumors of a prearranged meeting Tiahleigh might have had with some stranger. But each time they checked, the pieces just didn't fit. No messages, no online trail, nothing to point to anyone waiting for her that day. Instead, what they found were memories and whispers from the students at Marsden State High. Some said they saw her at school that morning. Some were even sure they'd spotted her at a McDonald's nearby. However, a review of the CCTV footage revealed nothing. Tiahleigh wasn't there. And then Rick's story, the claim that he'd dropped her off, began to unravel. Not a single bit of evidence backed up his words. No one saw her at school. No cameras, no proof.
Mate, is there anything you can tell me about this matter?
Nothing at all. I dropped her off.
It was as if the last time anyone saw Tiahleigh alive was long before the morning drive to school. And in that silence, detectives started to see the truth emerge. It wasn't a stranger that took Tiahleigh away that morning. No one lured her from the school. Instead, her supposed protector might have betrayed her. The horror wasn't outside her home. It was right there, behind closed doors. As the pieces clicked into place, the detectives faced the chilling reality that the monster they were hunting had been standing there the whole time, hiding behind the title of father. The investigation appeared to reach a dead end months after the discovery of Tiahleigh by the river. Leads had run thin, theories ran in circles, and people feared they'd never know what happened to the young girl who had vanished without a trace.
Again, I would like to just remind people that there is a reward available in relation to this investigation. It's a $250,000 reward, which is available to anybody who provides information leading to the apprehension of the offenders. But more importantly, as I've said before, there is also an indemnity from prosecution available for any person who may have been a part of the offence but didn't actually commit the murder themselves.
But then, one evening in May 2016, an anonymous tip came through Crime Stoppers, a call that would shatter the silence around her case and set everything in motion again. The caller had information that was both chilling and puzzling. They described how Tiahleigh had been feeling unwell, complaining of discomfort during those last weeks of October. The caller hinted that her stepbrother may have raped her and she was pregnant.
Friend came out to me and he started to cry and he said, Mum, I've done something terrible. And he said, I've had a sexual encounter with Tia or something to those words.
Okay, I was going to say, but they words.
No, probably not the words, but yeah, I don't really remember exactly what it was then, but yeah, it indicated that he'd had sexual encounter with Tia.
The message was clear.
It was, yeah. And I said, oh my God, mate. I was absolutely stunned, shocked. I said, oh mate, no, how could you let something like that happen? I said, we will deal with it. Rick was very concerned because he knows the implications for a boy of his age with a girl of her age.
Of course.
He was adamant about him doing jail time, that he would go to jail for something like this.
Yeah.
So we were concerned she could be pregnant or something.
Then, on the night of October 29th, the Thorburn family had gathered for a private meeting. Just one day had passed since Tiahleigh's reported disappearance. The detail struck the detectives hard. A family meeting before a disappearance wasn't something they could ignore. It was like a missing puzzle piece falling into place, and it forced the detectives to reopen every corner of the case they thought they had closed.
It was an anonymous call came through and gave us details that there was a Facebook message sent from Trent outlining a sexual activity with Tiahleigh. And that there had been a family meeting the night before she disappeared, and just by coincidence she goes missing the next day. Yes, it's suspicious.
So that Crime Stopper call was perhaps not a eureka moment, but the beginning of let's look at the Thorburns more closely. Let's crack this family.
Yes, it was. It was crucial.
With this tip in hand, detectives went back over everything, even the small details they had previously dismissed. It was becoming clearer that perhaps they had been looking in the wrong direction all along. The tip shattered the notion of a stranger lurking out there. Detectives now suspected that the answers lay within the Thorburn family itself. Now, for the first time, their attention turned inward, toward the very family that had fostered Tiahleigh. Desperate to uncover the truth, the detectives took a daring step. They quietly placed hidden recording devices in the Thorburn family home. It was risky, but it was the only way to see beyond the surface. Soon, these recordings would reveal conversations that painted a deeply troubling picture. Detectives began to hear Rick and his wife Julene coaching their two sons on what to say and how to respond, guiding them to make sure their stories stayed in line. To detectives, the Thorburn family seemed less like a home and more like a fortress of hidden truths, each member playing a role to protect something sinister. The truth was starting to surface. Detectives finally revealed what lay beneath the Thorburns' composed exterior as they reviewed the recorded conversations and messages. The evidence they found was startling. Each piece of evidence and each hidden conversation pointed to something sinister within the family. With this new evidence, detectives brought in Julene and one of her sons, Josh, for questioning. It was clear the web of lies was unraveling. As more details came to light, it became impossible for the Thorburns to hide behind their former lives. The respectable family images, the rural home, the quiet life they had portrayed. It was all just a mask, hiding the secrets they held tightly within their grasp.
It's more about protecting us, our family, our lifestyle, and our upstanding in the community.
We had to keep it all a secret. We had to pretend like we didn't know anything and, pretend.
As the investigations closed in, Rick tightened his hold, instructing each family member on what to say, ensuring every move they made aligned with his plan. He instructed his family to go about their lives, to keep their appearances, and to act as though nothing had happened. He told his sons to be seen in public to keep up the normal routine. But behind every normal moment, there was a tension, a sense of something deeply wrong that was too strong to ignore. For a while, the Thorburns managed to hold it together, maintaining their story. But the detectives weren't backing down. The more they looked, the more cracks they found. Of all the secrets in that house, none ran deeper than the one Rick Thorburn had locked away. That night, it was just him and Tiahleigh in the home, the rest of the family gone. He was alone with her, hidden behind closed doors, in control of everything. For months, he'd held a shadow over Tiahleigh, the kind of quiet authority that made her fear him. She knew enough to never feel safe when left alone with him. She had even tried running away more than once, hoping for any escape. But each time, she'd end up right under the same roof, back under Rick's control. And that night, there was no one else around.
The last time that you saw Tiahleigh Palmer alive, when was it?
In her bedroom, sitting on her bed.
Okay.
I said goodnight to her there.
Yep.
And expressed to her that she needed to stay there and put herself to sleep when she was ready, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And where was Rick?
I think he was outside the kitchen door, waiting for me to come back outside.
Okay. Was there anyone else in the house?
Nobody else in the house, no.
And then you left?
Mm-hmm.
When the family returned, Rick met them with a chilling declaration. Tia was gone. No explanations, no details, just a simple, final statement. To him, it was all handled, finished. But the truth was far more disturbing. He had hidden her in his shed, out of sight, planning to take her to the river and leave her there by morning. It was a scheme he'd put together alone, something no one else could question. And if anyone asked, Rick had already decided how he would answer. Don't worry, don't ask any questions. I've taken care of it. That was his way. No discussions, no room for protest.
The exact words, it's all taken care of or something. So what do you mean by that? So don't worry, don't ask any questions, I've taken care of it. And I went to go to her room and he said, don't go in there.
As the detectives dug deeper, every piece of Rick's carefully built story began to be unveiled. Those supposed sightings of Tiahleigh at school, the rumors of her heading off with a stranger, all of it started to fall apart. Rick had told the police that he'd dropped her off at school that morning, but as it turned out, that was a lie from the start. Tia had never reached the school gates. The idea of her meeting with an unknown stranger was only a story spun to mislead, a story Rick fed to anyone who'd listen. The truth? She hadn't been seen at school because she had never been there at all. Rick had orchestrated an entire story to keep people looking in the wrong direction.
You said that he was a bit worried about what might happen to Trent.
Yeah.
So we're going from that to killing her while you're out.
Yeah. No, I would never have left the house if I thought that. I had no indication, no feeling that he would do something like that at all.
Then came the night of October 29th, the night before everything changed. Rick had gathered his family in the living room, calling a meeting that carried a weight everyone felt but couldn't yet understand. There, he laid out the facts, sparing no detail. Everyone in that room understood what he was telling them. Each family member was bound to his version of events. It was a clear directive, one that bound them all in silence. They all decided to kill Palmer, and everyone was assigned their roles. Each word and every action was rehearsed. Rick had drilled them all, making sure they knew their roles, so no one would dare stray from his plan. To the Thorburns, keeping up the appearance of a respectable family was survival. Each of them had a role to play, a script to follow, a line they could never cross. Rick made sure of that. He impressed upon them the importance of protecting Trent and of keeping a version of events that would shield the family's reputation at any cost. The days after that night turned into a pattern of rehearsed lies, everyone knowing their part, the script carefully laid out by Rick. His hold over the family was absolute. No one dared to step out of line. To the outside world, they were the same family they'd always been, quiet, unassuming, responsible. But inside those walls, it was a house of secrets, each member carrying the weight of a lie they couldn't escape. Under pressure, the Thorburn family's unity unraveled, their secrets no longer held by Rick's word. They all lived under the same roof, but it was a prison of silence, bound by fear and loyalty to the man who made the rules. This was their life now, a web of deception woven so tightly it became difficult to breathe. Each day, each moment, Rick's commands hung over them, the knowledge of what had happened locked deep within their minds. The Thorburn family had become a machine, running on secrecy and fear, all to maintain the facade that Rick had forced upon them. The day after Tiahleigh was last seen, Rick had orchestrated everything down to the smallest detail. That morning, he gathered the family, his face cold and expressionless, and told them simply, "Tia is no longer with us." His tone left no room for questions, no space for discussion. It was an unspoken command: accept it and don't dig deeper. He made it clear that they were better off not knowing anymore, not asking what had happened or how it happened. He assured them that the less they knew, the safer they'd be.
And Dad proceeded to say that we all had to protect Trent. We all had to keep a story amongst everyone, and the public and everyone else, that the next day Tia was going to go missing from school. But he then informed me that Tia was, his exact words were, "Tia is no longer with us."
For Rick, it was about protecting an image he had spent years cultivating. He was not merely hiding his activities. He was crafting a story that portrayed him as a responsible and caring father. Every decision, every calculated move was to maintain the facade of respectability. It was enough for Rick that Tia had been silenced. He needed everyone else to fall in line, his version of events, to keep their secrets locked up tight. That morning, Rick drove by the school, determined to keep up the appearance that he had done his duty, dropped Tia off, and left her safe. He wanted the CCTV footage to catch his car driving by and create a trail that would back up his story. For months, he clung to this routine, maintaining the lie with a terrifying consistency. But as the weeks turned into months, the walls began to close in on him. Questions lingered, rumors began to spread, and people started to doubt the story Rick had so carefully crafted.
Mate, is there anything you can tell me about this matter?
Nothing at all. I dropped her off.
By mid-September, the police were circling closer than ever. They seized Rick's car, the same vehicle he'd used to stage his alibi. When questioned, Rick put on a defiant front, brushing off any inquiries. "Speak to the Crime and Corruption Commission," he told them, acting as if he had nothing to hide. But the cracks were starting to show, and for the first time, Rick felt his control slipping away. On September 20th, 2016, the truth finally caught up with the Thorburns. The police took the entire family into custody, each member facing serious charges that shattered the lie Rick had spent so long defending. Julene and Josh, buckling under the pressure, became state witnesses, agreeing to testify. They were charged with perjury and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Trent faced similar charges, his name now permanently stained. And at the center of it all was Rick, charged with murder and interference with Tiahleigh's remains. The weight of his own actions bore down on Rick, and he seemed to realize the game was over. The mask of control and power he wore so confidently began to crumble. After his arrest, Rick tried to escape one last time. Despite taking a handful of pills, Rick was unable to maintain control as he faced justice. Doctors revived him and placed him in a medically induced coma, forcing Rick to face the consequences he'd so desperately tried to avoid. The law had finally caught up to Rick Thorburn, and there was no escape, no carefully crafted story that could protect him now. The Thorburn family's web of secrets lay exposed for the world to see. A few days later, Rick woke up in the hospital, but there was no escaping what awaited him. The law had him in its grip, and the truth he'd worked so hard to bury was coming to light. It would all come out in the trial. Tiahleigh had tried to tell someone. She'd confided in her foster mother, hoping for help, but nothing changed. And just a week before she was gone, Tia tried to leave, wanting to stay with a friend. The Department of Child Safety had been notified, but they too did nothing. Everyone had failed her, leaving her alone in a place where she should have felt safe. When Trent, Rick's son, thought Tia might be pregnant, it was then that things spiraled to the darkest outcome. The family that was supposed to protect her chose to cover up their own wrongdoing, leaving Tia defenseless in a web of lies and betrayal. Rick's actions, along with the silence of those around him, led to an outcome too horrifying to accept. The details revealed in court shocked everyone. The family's decisions were not quick or panicked. They were deliberate, carefully crafted, and controlled by Rick's iron grip over the truth. In the end, justice came down hard. Josh was sentenced to 3 months, Julene to 18 months, and Trent received 4 years. And Rick, the man behind it all, got life, with no chance of parole for 20 years. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom, condemning Rick's deliberate, calculating actions and the way he coerced his family into weaving false stories to shield his own vile behavior. For Rick, life as he knew it was over. His control was gone, and with it, the power he held over the people around him.
Your conduct throughout all of the offending is made more shocking for the deliberateness of your actions and your willingness to coerce every member of your family to maintain false accounts in an effort to cover up your despicable behaviour.
By 2021, nearly all members of the Thorburn family had left prison and resumed their lives, with the exception of Rick, who remained incarcerated. And for Trent, prison life wasn't easy. Word of his actions spread, and he became a target, even in prison. Rick's case remained open. Rick faced an inquest in May 2021. The authorities wanted to piece together what really happened, but Rick, even then, evaded the truth. He had pleaded guilty to avoid a full trial, to avoid standing in court and recounting every detail. Instead, he offered little more than a hollow excuse, claiming he didn't remember that night. He insisted that he had completely forgotten the entire ordeal, as if he could somehow dissociate himself from the horror he had unleashed. In a letter, Rick wrote the only glimpse of remorse he ever offered, saying he couldn't understand how he could have done what he did in a sane mind. But his words, empty and shallow, failed to offer any real insight. His family's web of lies unraveled, leaving only the bleak reality of a household that had shattered the innocence they were supposed to protect. This story, the twisted, heartbreaking tale of a family torn apart by betrayal and lies, is one that leaves a mark. The Thorburn family's actions, the depth of their deception, revealed the lengths people will go to protect themselves, even at the cost of others. And now, with the truth exposed, the legacy they leave behind is one of broken trust, of secrets that could no longer stay hidden. In the end, justice came for Rick and the family, but at a cost that will never truly be repaid.